Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for being here today for this really special lecture event entitled Perspectives on Global Health Research and Careers, a joint lecture between the School of Public Health and the Division of Biology and Medicine. For those that don't know me, my name is Mukesh Jain. I serve as the Dean of Medicine and Biological Sciences and Senior Vice President for Health Affairs. Really a pleasure to welcome all of you and all that are watching via live stream to the Warren Alpert Medical School of Brown University. In a few minutes, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Dean Jha, who will introduce our speaker. So what I thought in my remarks I'd focus on is other aspects related to Mr. John Fogarty. And I think it's really fitting that we're hosting someone who is a leader within the Fogarty International Center at the NIH, not only because of that leadership role, but because Dr. Kilmarx, who you'll hear from momentarily, is an alumnus of Brown's Medical School. And the history of our institutions and communities are deeply intertwined. So the Fogarty International Center is named for Congressman John Fogarty, who represented the state of Rhode Island for a little over a quarter century as a congressman. He was a champion for medical research, for the advancement of public health, and for the care of people with disabilities. And he played an incredibly important role in the founding of this medical school. So in 1960, Congressman Fogarty facilitated the creation of the Institute for Research in Health Sciences at Brown with Professor of Biology J. Walter Wilson. With Rhode Island's health and welfare in mind, Congressman Fogarty encouraged Brown University President Barnaby Keeney to reinstate medical education at the university. Thankfully, President Keeney listened to Congressman Fogarty's advice, and in 1962, the Brown Corporation created a 2-year program that over a few years subsequently would become a full medical school. Of course, Congressman Fogarty is internationally renowned for spearheading the growth of the NIH. And as I learned, some of the greatest increase in NIH's funding, nearly 10x during his support. And for sponsoring the Health for Peace bill that supported international health research and training, and a host of other achievements that all supported health and education initiatives in Rhode Island and across the land and globe. For those contributions and many, many others that I have not noted, Congressman Fogarty was a recipient of many, many honors, including a special award for extraordinary public service from the Albert Lasker Foundation in 1959. Congressman Fogarty's daughter, Mary Fogarty McAndrew, it's in the front row, is joining us this evening. So thank you, Mary, for being here. And we thank you for being with us, keeping the memory of your father, and as the Lasker Committee noted, and this is a quote, for his splendid service to the people of this nation, keeping all of that at the forefront of our minds. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dean Jha to introduce our speaker. Sheesh.
Thank you, Mukesh. I'm going to keep my remarks brief only because you all are here to hear Peter Kilmarx, not me. But as Mukesh said, I'm Ashish Jha, I'm the Dean of the School of Public Health. And it really is just this incredible honor and pleasure to spend a couple of minutes talking to you about Peter Kilmarx and who he is. And again, you'll get to hear from him. Obviously, Brown has a special affection for Dr. Kilmarx, given that he trained here. But for those of us who've been in the global health world for the last, for me, about 15 years, Peter has been a hero. And I want to talk a little bit about why that is. Like all good academics, he's written lots of papers, is widely cited, has written across a range of issues, a lot of it on HIV, but he's also led real work on the ground. He was CDC's country director in Zimbabwe at a time when real leadership was needed around HIV, TB, and other diseases. He was a team lead during the Ebola outbreak in Sierra Leone, was also on the response team in Guinea. And Peter's had a really incredible career. At Fogarty, he was the interim director. And I could keep going with a list of accomplishments, but I just want to finish with one that I think is particularly important, which is that there has been this transition in global health over the last 20 years. And I think Dr. Kilmarx has facilitated this about as much as anybody, to really change the dynamic of how we think about global health. For a long time, global health has a strong tradition, but not always a storied one. Often it came out of a tradition of tropical medicine. For a long time, it was called international health. I don't know what that means, international health. But global health was a deliberate effort to rethink what exactly our relationship in the US was with the global South. And much of the, I think, best work when NIH has done extraordinary work, and Fogarty has done extraordinary work, much of the best of that work has been building up the capabilities and capacity of scholars in the global South. And Peter has spearheaded many things in his role as Fogarty's deputy director, interim director, other roles he has played. But I think there's probably nothing that's going to have as much of a profound long-term impact as that commitment to having deep expertise, scholarship stemming from the global South. So he's been a hero for many of us, and I'm delighted that he's took time to come spend time with us. Dr. Peter Kilmarx, everybody. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dean Jane and Dean Jha. It's really an honor to be back at Brown 34 years after I graduated. This building wasn't here. This classroom wasn't here when I was here. I was actually in the Dartmouth Brown program, so my time in classrooms was spent in Hanover, and my time on the wards was spent here in Providence. But I'm thrilled to be back here, and I'm going to talk. I'm going to aim for about 35, 40 minutes, starting out talking about global health, about what we do at NIH and at Fogarty, and then I was asked to spend a few minutes just talking about my career and some thoughts about your careers in global health for those of you who are trainees in early career, and I hope some helpful insights around that. Let me go to my title slide. And then I'm just going to start off with actually the mission of NIH to make sure we're all on the same page starting out. And it's really a twofold mission. And the first part of it is about the basic science. And there's kind of a balance between the basic science and the applied science. But we think it's very important to do that basic science research, like we fund NASA to explore the universe that may not be necessarily helpful in the next fiscal year to life on Earth, but we just think as Homo sapiens that's an important thing to do. And sometimes somebody's messing around with the immunology of bacteria, what's the application of that? And then we get CRISPR-Cas coming out of that. So we do emphasize the basic science, and then also, of course, the application of that knowledge to actually improve health and reduce disability. So there's 27 different institutes and centers at the NIH. Some of them are kind of household names. This is showing them in order of their budgets, and these are millions of dollars. And so Fogarty there with the lowest budget, that's not $95, that's $95 million. But the Billionaires Club, you're probably familiar with, the National Cancer Institute, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Institute of Aging has gotten considerable additional resources in recent years for Alzheimer's research, heart, lung, and blood, et cetera. But that's, you can see that for most special populations, organ systems, disease areas, there's an institute or center at NIH to support that research. And the overall budget's $47 billion, so it is the biggest funder of biomedical and behavioral health research in the world. So this is, probably my main message about the importance of global health and why we as taxpayers, why we as NIH, why we as researchers really want to pursue global health research. There's a number of reasons I'll go through quickly. The unique populations, especially in genetics, how much we're learning Most of the genomes are still from Caucasians in the West, and so we're doing a lot more in Africa and elsewhere to really expand that knowledge. There's also that second major bullet about unusual exposures, and of course infections is very important. And if we want to develop a Ebola vaccine and treatment, as we've done, we couldn't wait for it to come to the U.S. We had to do that internationally, and similarly with Zika and dengue and things that we're doing now that are actually threats to the U.S. We need to collaborate, but it's far beyond that in terms of environmental exposures, dietary exposures, and other research opportunities. There's also unique interventions, some frugal and novel technologies, including around mobile health, some work that's being done here at Brown, working internationally, but that's also a very vibrant area. I can also mention here about reciprocal innovation, that we're learning a lot from these applications that we're bringing back and applying here in the US. All the best scientists aren't in the US. There's these global diverse set of investigators that we learn from. And then the next is about the patient populations, and especially for rare diseases or particular clinical trials that have stringent criteria, that it's really necessary to collaborate globally to be able to meet those study goals. We can learn a lot in the US about alternative health systems from other countries. And then, as I think you see at Brown and around the country and around the world, there's just a lot of interest in trainees and early career people in global health research. So when we talk to Congress people, we say, this is your constituents that want to do this work that we're funding. And then just lastly, we need these new tools to reach these global health goals, whether it's HIV or malaria or some of these new emerging health threats. We constantly need to develop and innovate to be able to address them. Just to mention about this image, I gave a talk to a group, an ophthalmology meeting in Mexico City a couple of years ago. And this is when DALI, at Salvador Dali, the image generating artificial intelligence program, was new. So I said, DALI, make an image of eye researchers with an indigenous person in DNA and corn in the Mexican painting style. And this is what it came up with, which I thought was a very good job. And the message here, AI will not take your job, but someone that knows how to use AI might take your job. So really, it's incumbent on all trainees to really learn something about how to use AI in almost anything that you're doing. So here's one important example, and it's sort of easy or mindless to come up with infectious disease examples, but here in Alzheimer's research, one of our grantees really helped to characterize a large family cohort in Colombia in South America, that they have an autosomal dominant form of Alzheimer's disease. So every family member with this gene is invariably going to develop Alzheimer's disease by the time they're in their 40s. And so you can imagine, if you want to do a study of a biomarker or of a preventive intervention, to do that in an undifferentiated population in the US, you'd need thousands of people in a decade to see if it works or not. And this is actually happening in this family. And it's thousands of people in this extended family. They can have a few hundred people in a couple of years. And still recently, they just identified another gene in this family that actually lowers the risk of Alzheimer's disease. So that's a really robust non-infectious disease example. So a few years ago, in our role at Fogarty to make the case that global health is an important part of what NIH does, I worked with Josh Grubbs, who was a postback at the time, and we asked the question of all the publications in PubMed in a given year that cite NIH funding, what percentage of those publications have a non-US affiliated co-author? And we thought we'd be thrilled that it would be 20% or something. It was 35% of all NIH funded publications have a non-US affiliated co-author. And that second bullet there, those publications that have both US and non-US co-authors have a higher scientific impact score than the publications that have US authors only. So there's a lot of it, and it's high impact science that's being supported by NIH. You can look at the countries on the left there. The number one country, surprise, no surprise, is China, up from number 4 over a decade. This is through 2017. That's, I think, bobbled around since then. We need to repeat this analysis. Those other countries are all high-income countries. On the right side, you can see the other low and middle-income countries other than China. And it's, Brazil, India, South Africa, Mexico, about 1,000 publications per year with authors from those countries. So there's a nice tool that I would recommend anyone interested in global health or actually health research generally. It's worldreport.nih.gov. This was all of the major funders of research. So it's now, I think it's over 16, but it's at least 16 of the major funding agencies. So NIH and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the UK Medical Research Council, et cetera, have their data there. And it shows not only the direct awards, which for NIH is mostly in the US, it also shows all the collaborations. So you can really get a sense of the global footprint of some of the work that's getting done. So if you want to see who's doing sickle cell research in Africa, you can look it up here. Or if you're working in Sierra Leone and you wonder who else is funded there and what they're doing, you can look it up here. So worldreport.nih.gov. And then if we look at that, this is the best way for us in a way that's actually the best way anyway, but also in a way that's publicly available. If you look at the World Report data just at 2023, just at the NIH funding, it's over 20,000 records of, excluding the US, it's over 20,000 records of collaborations and direct awards funded by NIH in other countries. Sorry for the issues with the legend there. The blue is high income, the red is low income. And so it's quite skewed that some 89% of all these records are in just 42 countries. And you can see that a lot of it is skewed towards higher income countries. But there are a number of middle income and even low income countries in this group, and some real centers of excellence and incredible science going on in Uganda, Malawi, Ethiopia, even some of the low income countries where these collaborations are being supported and taking place. So I think part of what we'd like to do is kind of shift this curve and, where's Laos and Lesotho and Paraguay, and can we kind of spread some of this and build that capacity in those partnerships in those other countries. So now that same data, those 21,000 plus collaborations, this is now looking at the different NIH institutes and centers to see who's doing this work. And so it's not surprisingly National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases that's has the lion's share. Cancer also very active. General medical sciences is next, heart, lung, and blood, et cetera. But a key message here is that every NIH institute and center that funds extramural research funds global international collaborations. So if you're thinking about how can I get NIH funding to work globally, you can think outside the box, and it may be oral health that you're actually working on, or it may be something related to deafness and communication disorders, or alcohol abuse. So it's really a very broad support from NIH for these global collaborations. So now to talk about Fogarty, the Fogarty International Center, as we had a very nice introduction to that. But really, our mission is I put it in 2 baskets. And the first is just to support all of the global international work by NIH to support those partnerships. And then the second part of it is to really do the capacity strengthening and training in the lower income countries to be able to really advance the medical science in those areas. And I'll talk a little bit more about Congressman Fogarty and his daughter Mary, who's here, and his great colleague, Mel Laird, quoted here, who was a Republican. And in those days, they actually, for some of you younger people, may not appreciate this, but they used to actually work together and do great things. Really an incredible impact of Congressman Fogarty's life. And I found this just a couple of weeks ago in our offices. This was the cover story of the December 1992 issue of Rhode Island Medicine, and just noting this is the 25th anniversary of the Fogarty Center, and really the issue was about Congressman Fogarty, how he was a bricklayer from Gloucester, member of Congress for 37 years, and really the leading proponent of medical research generally, the great increase in the NIH budget under his leadership, and then really an advocate for global health and global collaboration. And the editor of the journal was Dean Aronson, the first dean of the medical school. And his daughter was one of my best friends in high school at Moses Brown. I spent many hours at his house. Dean Aronson wrote a letter of recommendation for me to come to medical school. So that was a very nice connection for me. I can also note, this is kind of funny, that the cover of Rhode Island Medicine has this image with this, if you can't see it, it says "Vote Democratic." So this is not a Hatch Act violation. I'm just faithfully showing what was on that Rhode Island Medicine. Oh, and so the funny thing is, so I always wore bow ties, and I'm a Rhode Islander. I grew up in Barrington. I sort of heard about Fogarty through my career, and only when I ended up there did I know about Fogarty being a bow tie wearing Rhode Islander. So it's a very also nice coincidence. Anyway, I thought this is also a very nice quote about Aronson quoting Chekhov, that there's no such thing as national science, just like there's no such thing as a national multiplication table. What was merely national is no longer science. I thought that was very nice. And so this 25th anniversary of Congressman Fogarty's death, the Rhode Island Medicine Journal dedicates the issue to him, and the author of the essay is Dr. James Crowley, who's here in the audience. And I actually have a great connection with Dr. Crowley. When I came back from the Peace Corps in 1986, my eosinophil count was 50%. And those of you who aren't clinicians, it should be about 2%. And I had filaria, so it was 50%. And they said, oh, you should go see Dr. Crowley. He's a hematologist with a special interest in eosinophils. And so Dr. Crowley said, you have some parasitic infection, and if you treat it, it will go away. But what are you doing this summer? I was on my way to Dartmouth Medical School in the fall, and I didn't really have plans. He said, come work in my lab, and we'll draw your blood on Monday morning and purify the eosinophils, and we're going to develop an anti-eosinophil antibody test. So that was my summer job. So a great benefit. Always look for the benefits of these things as you go along. But Dr. Crowley, that was my introduction to medical research, and really pleased that you could be here. Okay, moving along. Fogarty's strategic goals are laid out here. I'm not going to go through them all in detail, but we'll note the footnote. Our new strategic planning is underway with our new director, who I'll show a picture of her in a minute. But we really, we have this incredibly broad supporting all of NIH and all their goals. So I was an infectious disease person, and now, we're doing very, very broad, building the capacity, the individuals, the institutions, and the networks. Innovation, we also support a lot of research in addition to the training. Implementation science, something that we emphasize, and I know Brown is also a leader in. The dual burden, so it's very broadly communicable and non-communicable diseases. And then the partnerships as the last bullet. And as I go further along in life, I realize how important those partnerships really are. And if there's some situation in a country where we have a collaborator and a grantee, we can pick up the phone and get the information and immediately help them and whatever is needed, or initiating research. And where we don't, it's very hard to do that. You really need those building those partnerships and relationships before there's an emergency or some special need. This is just kind of a schematic showing our approach to that capacity building and realizing that we really need well-trained individuals that have protected time, especially in lower income countries. There's people don't have protected time in their academic centers to conduct research. So we support that as part of what we do. And then having the mentorship both from the lower income country and from a US collaborator. And so at the top there, That's our training and career awards, which I'll say a little bit more about. And then over the course of someone's career, they kind of graduate from the Fogarty support to the other institutes that fund more of the research, the R01, and the other research grants. And so we have, thousands of scientists around the world that we've helped to train. Ongoingly, there's about 500 training projects with over 100 academic institutions. And again, it's very diverse. It's not just tropical medicine or infectious diseases. It's really all areas of medical research that we try to support. One of the key programs, and one that Brown has had an important role in, is around the HIV research training program that started, and this is really the beginning of when the Fogarty Center got more involved in the capacity building and training, was with the resources and the need that came about with the AIDS epidemic. So that's gone through multiple iterations over time, but really thousands of trainees now around the world, including many of the leaders of WHO, ministers of health, national research organizations, especially helpful during COVID to have all those connections for NIH, but then just for everybody to have that capacity around the world. So there's about 110 grants in 28 countries currently, and again, substantial Brown University playing a role in this in the Philippines and India and Africa and elsewhere. And so this is our new director, Dr. Kathy Newsel. She came on board in May. She was a vaccinologist from the University of Maryland, now doing great as the Fogarty director. And just to mention some of the individual training programs, we have the Launch Global Fellows and Scholars program. And on the last slide, or the second to last slide, there's a QR code that you can download the whole presentation. So that'll have the links and everything. So you can take pictures as you go, but also wait for that. But anyway, the Global Fellows and Scholars program, or Launch, is for both U.S. and lower income country trainees, doctoral students, medical students, and postdocs. And then most NIH institutes have a K award. Our K01 award is for U.S. researchers, 5 years of career development support. And for a Fogarty K, the grantee spends half of their time, or more, at least half of their time, in the LMIC. So it's very good for some people, but not necessarily for everyone. But the last one that's very popular, the K43, or Emerging Global Leader Award. This is a K award, but only for scientists from low and middle income countries that are eligible for that. And Fogarty is the only one that has it. Other institutes, if someone's studying mental health, and NIMH will chip in the funding for that, but that's an important opportunity to be aware of. Just a few examples. This was a Brown University, another Brown University alum, Jerry Bloomfield, was a Fogarty Fellow working on HIV and heart disease in Kenya. Then he had a Fogarty K Award working on risk factors for atherosclerosis in Kenya, transitioned from Brown to Duke University, and now he's really built up a global cardiology research program out of Duke University with collaborations in Kenya and elsewhere. Sikaluli Moyo, he's a Zimbabwean but lives and works in Botswana. He was a Fogarty Fellow in Botswana, looking at evolutionary trends of HIV-1. And he's currently a K43 grantee, looking really interesting, looking at viral diversity as a marker of HIV incidence. So if someone's own viral population is more diverse, presumably they've been infected for a longer time. His great claim to fame, so I was there in Botswana, they've got this incredible HIV surveillance system, and then COVID comes along. So like everybody else, they transitioned from doing whatever they were doing to doing COVID research. So this incredible SARS-CoV-2 surveillance system in Botswana, and they were the first ones to actually identify and sequence the Omicron variant. It was hours or days before South Africa did it, but it was actually our friend Sikaluli who was the first. And then just one other, Leah Katzelnick, was a Fogarty Fellow and worked in Ecuador and also Nicaragua. and now she's the chief of the viral epidemiology and immunity unit in the intramural program at NIH. So lots of possible career paths. Just to talk about a few of the priorities that we see going forward. Roger Glass, the previous Fogarty director, and I wrote this a few years ago, but really we think the COVID really underlined, and we continue to think that this building research capacity is so important for all these broad areas, whether it's climate change and health or non-communicable diseases, but that we also through COVID have this new kind of sense of humility and equity in our relationships that so many other countries actually did a really great job, and even better job than much of the US in the COVID response. So we also wanted to underscore that. And then just some of the areas where the unfinished COVID-19 research agenda, the huge increase in NCDs, the greatest increase in diabetes now is actually in Africa. One Health is a very broad area of research. Planetary health is another very broad area of research, including climate change and health, and then implementation research as a key part of that. So we were criticized for saying, you listed everything, you didn't prioritize anything. And we said, we're Fogarty, we're the NIH, we can't just pick one area. So our priority is the capacity building. That's sort of the cross-cutting thing that we think we need to do across the board. Just a few more themes, more on this concept of promoting equity. There's been a lot said and written about decolonization in recent years. At NIH, we're calling that promoting equity in global health research. And so Fogarty's leading with the other major institutes that work internationally, an NIH-wide effort to look at this and to advance these issues. We had a request for information a couple of years ago, very robust response to that, and pointing out some of the key areas just in terms of the funding inequities, the lack of administrative capacity in a lot of the other country settings. Really, who decides what is the research agenda, who owns the data, who gets to write the first paper. These issues we're really digging into and have quite active working groups. And some of these things are quite easy in terms of sharing language from different institutes that we can put into our funding opportunity announcements to bring this out. Some of the others are more challenging, but we're definitely very active in this area. And then as one metric of that, I worked with Ezine Akudinobi a couple of years ago. She had finished up her MPH and worked with us for a couple of years. This is a metric of research equity. We asked of all of the publications funded by Fogarty that are about Africa, so have a mesh topic of an African country or Africa, what % of them have a US-based first author versus an Africa-based first author? And at the beginning of the analysis period in 2008, that blue line, it was mostly US-based first authors, but over the course of the decade, it was mostly, and if you add the red sub-Saharan Africa and green people with dual affiliation, sub-Saharan Africa and the US, it's by the end of the time, it was a majority of the authors of these papers funded by Fogarty about Africa had an African affiliation. For the last authors, that was still about 50-50, so some room for improvement there. And we did find that the citation rate of the Africa-affiliated author first authored papers was lower than the US one, so still some equity issues there. But we saw this as progress and as an important metric. And this has been done at the institutional level. You could do this at Brown. This has been done in the research field area. We did another paper looking at sexually transmitted infections. But it's one, it's obviously not the whole story, but it's one metric to follow. The last point in this about NIH and Fogarty, having lived and worked in a lot of these countries around the world, I realized that there's a lot of ethno-linguistic minorities and other marginalized populations in other countries. So if we think, oh, we're funding country X, good for us, our job is done. But if you live there, you realize there's these people that are also excluded from research and from these activities. So last year we said any of our research training programs around the world, if you as the grantee can propose additional training for people who are members of groups that are underrepresented as researchers in your countries, will provide supplemental funding. We had no idea this American concept, how is it, how are they going to interpret it, or will they even care in other countries? But we had a great response, 25 applications from 15 countries, and very diverse, different research areas, HIV, other infectious disease, NCD, bioethics, et cetera, diverse geographically, South America, Africa, Asia, and then diverse some of the groups. We have Quechua-speaking indigenous minorities in South America doing brain research. We have refugees in Jordan, actually people living in refugee camps doing climate change and health research. We have pastoralists, Turkana pastoralists in Kenya doing research, et cetera. So that was a encouraging start to this approach to things. So shifting gears, as time is marching by, I'm just going to say a little bit about my own career and hope to stimulate and share a few observations around that. I will say when I was a pre-med as an undergraduate at Dartmouth, I didn't feel like I was sort of mature enough or motivated enough to go to medical school. So I went into the Peace Corps and ended up in a very rural, remote part of Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of Congo, living in a mud hut, the first and only Westerner in that area, raising tilapia very nicely in these very nice fish ponds. And this was one of the village chiefs, Chief Shamba, that keep an eye on him. He'll come back later. And the fish farmers would name their sons after me, Baby Pierre, and one of the baby Pierres died of measles. And I said, how could you die of measles? We have a measles vaccine. I just got a booster. And then learned a lot more about kind of healthcare and public health, and said, okay, now I'm ready for medical school. And was in the Dartmouth Brown program. I wanted to go to Johns Hopkins for residency. So I wanted to spend time with Chuck Carpenter just because he's was such a terrific man. And he had this strong connection with Hopkins. So we made up an outpatient infectious disease rotation so I could spend a term with Chuck, which worked. He got me into Hopkins. And I learned about CDC, the CDC Epidemiology Intelligence Service Program while I was there. And I was infatuated with tuberculosis, but my father always said, if you think you want to study English literature, don't just take the Shakespeare class, find out who's the best English professor and take her class, whatever she's teaching. So Tom Quinn was at Hopkins. He had a dual affiliation, Hopkins and NIH. And I said, here's about 10 different jobs at CDC I'm interested in. What do you think? He said, go work with these guys, Mike St. Louis and Tom Peterman in sexually transmitted diseases. You'll get the best training and experience there. So that's what I did, and he was right. And incredibly diverse set of activities, large data sets, access to care, syphilis outbreak in Baltimore, number of wonderful things that I got to do as an STD trainee with really great mentoring. And one Friday, my mentor said, do you want to go do this research, look at this research, we have an ongoing HIV cohort study. Do you want to look at the STD data from that study? And like a fool, I said, no, I'm too busy. And then all weekend, I thought, what a stupid thing to say. So first thing Monday morning, I said, of course I want to go to Thailand and look at the STD data in the HIV cohort. And so it worked out. I ended up getting a job there. My first job after training, I was the chief of this HIV prevention research station with CDC, the only American there up in northern Thailand in Chiang Rai, and incredibly productive time. We were doing topical microbicide clinical trials and other things, but all good things come to an end. I thought I'd stay there forever, but then I got a call and said, can you please come be the CDC country director in Botswana? And another mentor said, these opportunities don't come along very often. You've got to go sometime, go. And so then was leading this huge group and hobnobbing with the head of state and the minister of health. And this was in 2002 when PEPFAR started in 2003. And so our budget went from $10 million to 20 to 40 to $80 million over the next few years. So a very busy and rewarding time. Among other things, we did what I now would call an implementation research study of introducing opt-out testing for pregnant women, and just looking at the black bars there, changing from voluntary testing to routine rapid testing, the proportion of pregnant women with HIV who learned their status went from under 50% to over 90% with that work, and then that was really then rolled out nationally. So all good things come to an end. Went back to CDC to Atlanta, and while I was there, I got a letter with a cell phone number for Chief Shamba from 20 years earlier. They never had telecommunications, but now we're texting each other. And he texted me in Chaluba and said, "There's Ebola in the village, and when would I come build a hospital?" And this is like 2 a.m, and we didn't know anything about it. So I talked to the Ebola people at CDC. They said, "We don't know anything about an Ebola outbreak." So we said, "Shamba, go to the hospital and call us." And we talked to the hospital director, and we didn't know what it was, but it sounded a lot like Ebola. And I said, "Oh, I've been name requested by the village chief. I've got to go be part of this outbreak response." And indeed, it was Ebola. And so I helped to really get them situated, set up the laboratory. That's Stuart Nickel from CDC, talking with Christian from MSF about, what time do you want the specimens? Do you want red tops or blue tops? And how will we get the results back to you? So keep in touch with your old buddies, because you never know what could come out of it. And then I got itchy feet, went to be the CDC country director in Zimbabwe, and back to a nice small team, and really helping. We were working closely with the Ministry of Health and starting 10,000 people a month. They were, with our support, 10,000 people with HIV per month getting started on antiretroviral treatment in the country. So that was another busy, exciting time. So I guess just to summarize some takeaways for early career people and trainees, I had no idea what Fogarty was. I had no interest in NIH when I started out. Just whatever you're doing, do an excellent job, make an impact, be able to describe what you did, and the next opportunity will come along. And don't think, what am I going to do in 20 years? Think, what am I going to do in 5 years? Very important to have a good mentor. If you think your passion is the left kidney, but the best mentor is going to be a right kidney laboratory, go work in the right kidney laboratory. You can change. It's really important, the people that you're working with and the kind of support you're going to get for your career. Seize these opportunities when they come along, when they say, do you want to, you got to finish what you're doing, show impact. But when someone says, do you want to go do this amazing thing, say yes. And then keep in touch with your classmates, your professors, everybody, because that's these partnerships, these networks are so important. So here's the QR code. Sorry, I went on a little long. If you want to download the presentation, you can grab it from there, or I'm sure Becky will send it to you. It's in the public domain as work by the US government. And I'll just end with this quote from Congressman Fogarty, that this matter of expanding research is perhaps the one truly global effort in which all nations can and will join together as real partners. So I'll just also encourage you, our funding newsletter goes out weekly to about 250,000 people. So I'm sure someone at Brown is reading every week and seeing what are the opportunities for you. So I hope, as part of my hidden agenda being here, is to have more Fogarty applications and funding coming to Brown. So please make this worth my while. Thank you, everybody. Thanks so much.
All right, we have one microphone for the Q&A, which is Malabika and all of you. And we need to be on mic so our colleagues on Zoom can hear us. So bear with me as I get my steps in if you have lots of questions while we share a microphone. But Malabika, the podium microphone is also working if you want to use that.
Oh, okay. And we can repeat questions if someone wants to just shout it out.
No, so I think I have a very loud voice.
But there's an online audience.
It's the Zoom people. So, thank you very much, Peter. Just to tell you that I was a Fogarty Fellow in 1997. After I finished my MPH at Harvard, I applied for sexually transmitted infection research in Bangladesh and went to University of Alabama, Birmingham, and had Sten Vermont as my mentor.
Yeah.
So, see, when I connected in many ways, then I had the honor to be on the same board and consortium of Universities and Global Health with Peter, and we are working together. So, thank you very much for coming and joining this session, and all this information I think is very helpful. So, we will open for the question and answer. Is there any question to Peter? Yes.
Dean.
Thanks for really just a spectacular talk.
Hold on just a second.
Thank you very much for an absolutely beautiful talk. I was picking up on something Ashish said, and just to get your perspective, when I was in training, there were different names for global health, international health, et cetera, tropical diseases. What has been the biggest surprise to you as you reflect on your career and where global health research has gone? And what is the, I don't want to use disappointment, but what is the biggest opportunity that you see that, some of the younger faces in the audience could really help address?
Yeah, thanks. I think, my era was really with HIV, and when I was on the plane going to Zaire in 1980, must have been a Tuesday, in November of 1983, the New York Times Science section, which of course comes out on Tuesdays, said, "Oh my goodness, there's a lot of HIV in Zaire," and they were just starting to appreciate that. And even like our Peace Corps training about, being sexual, safe sex, talked about penicillin-resistant gonorrhea. They hadn't gotten HIV into the safe sex curriculum at that point. But then, in the hospital here, Rhode Island Hospital, Roger Williams, a lot of people with HIV, and then PEPFAR. And so many of these international programs have really been built on this funding, our work, NIAID's work, how we learned about treatment as prevention, how we've learned about those long-acting antiretrovirals. Almost all the endpoints are coming from lower income countries. So that's, that was sort of that generation, that era. But now we're seeing this incredible expansion in the genomic research, the non-communicable disease research, climate change and health. There's no PEPFAR for NCD. So but in a sense, you can say, we don't have billions of dollars for implementation, but research is really where we can be involved and make that difference. So I think we're really, as I showed at NIH, and that wasn't a dynamic image, but those other institutes are increasingly, the new directors of these smaller institutes will say, we want to work more globally, and can Fogarty please help us in more? So I would say, Jerry Bloomfield, he was a Fogarty Fellow, and now he's running a global cardiology research program. So to think, don't look at someone from the last generation. Look forward to what's interesting to you and you're passionate about, and some resources where you can make a difference. Okay, now we need a question from that corner of the room so Becky can get more steps. Oh, there's someone here. No, there's someone here.
Thank you so much for your talk. I was a Fogarty Scholar in 2010 with Jerry Bloomfield, when I was a fellow in Kenya. So thank you. It was life-changing. So highly recommend it for trainees in the room. Thank you for bringing up the issue of authorship equity. I really appreciated that slide. It's something that I think a lot of faculty are discussing here at Brown. And I think one of the challenges has been in those conversations that promotion committees and funding agencies use first and senior author publications really as criteria for getting awarded grants. So I'm curious if you have any guidance, what have been the conversations at Fogarty in terms of how do we encourage global health researchers to really put their colleagues in first and senior author positions when that's the
Yeah,
situation?
no, it's a complex question. Maybe you should talk to your dean about how some of those can be changed. A couple of things. One of the key factors, I think, I've never worked in academia, but is about how many grants are you getting and how much money are you bringing in with the 50% overhead that the institution's getting. For the training programs, the overhead is 8%, whether it's a US or a non-US institution. So for the training programs, there's less of that dynamic at play in terms of the grants and who's the principal investigator and which institution is primarily getting that overhead funding. But for the publications, so you also saw, it's not a zero-sum game. It's not like there's 100 publications a year and if you get more, I get less. The total number was also increasing. So I think if you can structure it properly, one of my heroes, Andy Dykins from University of Illinois in Chicago, he was a Peace Corps volunteer in Mauritania and then got a Fogarty K and went to Senegal and said, I want to do implementation research, but you tell me, what's your priority? We'll do that. And they said, it's cervical cancer. So we set up this cervical cancer implementation research program in Eastern Senegal. He's got Peace Corps volunteers helping with the rollout of that. And and everyone's a lot of publications. He's the first author on some, they're the first author on the others. But it's really jointly, I think it's more important to jointly develop that research agenda. And then, I think the culture will change or is changing. Some other leading institutions, I've been told their global health dean has said, no, we're changing it and you will get recognition. There's co-first authors, there's co-last authors. I'm not sure all the web bibliometric tools have caught up with that. But I think there's enough of a cultural shift going on that it can be worked out.
Hey, Peter, Jody, Rich. I really enjoyed your talk tremendously. I've been at Brown for 30 years. I feel like, so many people you mentioned I connected to, like, what's going on here? How many people are, there's supposed to be billions of people on this planet, and there's only a handful that are doing this really exciting and fun work.
Yeah.
And that inspired me. I ended up doing my residency at Emory because it's close to the CDC. And boy, wouldn't that be cool? I rented a garage apartment, which happened to be Barbara and Roger's garage apartment.
Okay.
Lived there.
Yes.
They adopted me.
Did they let you use the pool?
Well, this is the previous house.
Oh, okay.
And I had to step out during your talk because Roger just called me.
Oh.
So I better take that call. And then came here and got to work with Chuck Carpenter and the wonderful program, and and Roger helped me have a 3-month rotation as a resident in Bangladesh, which really just changed my whole outlook and changed my career and passion for public health and was fantastic. So then I get here, and the intern applicants would come to the Miriam before they merged, and we had some wonderful international medical graduates working there, and they would roll me out to tell the stories of my how much fun I had with it, and you to talk to the intern applicants, and there'd be a room of them, and I would tell about I said, oh my goodness, I got my MD. This is my ticket to ride. I'm going to go explore the world with it. I'm going to have the fun that we all want to have. And I would look across the sea of faces, and consistently, year after year, about a third of them, you could just see it in their eyes. They're just hungry to yes, I want to do that.
Yeah.
The other third, 2/3, not so much.
Yeah.
But it was consistent all the time. Now, I think the corporatization of medicine has changed things, and the Zoom meetings for intern applicants, and maybe the savants that are, the corporate savants have figured out that they better keep me away from those intern applicants. So I haven't had that opportunity lately to look about those faces. But I'm wondering if some of that enthusiasm has been waned by where medicine's going now. But I think the message to all of you is, look at what one person has done in his career and had so much fun doing it and touched so many people. And there's a lot of people like that. So encourage you all to come on in. The water's warm. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. Now, we talk about, we hear a lot about burnout in clinicians, and I don't get burnout. I love what I do, and the people I work with love what they do in public health. I do miss, I was good at clinical medicine. I was a great diagnostician. I loved being at the bedside, and I don't get a chance to do that. So there are plenty of people who do both. That was not the path that I ended up on. I do wonder about that. I've been at Fogarty for now over 9 years, and it was really this kind of peak global health time period. We had so much resources with PEPFAR. Everybody wanted to be Paul Farmer, and at some universities that had a global health undergraduate major, that became the most popular major in the university. So I'm meeting with many folks tomorrow. I kind of want to hear what's happening in terms of how that's evolving. I think with COVID, a lot of things changed, that people have been less willing to even put on pants and go to the office, never mind go halfway around the world. There's not, everybody who wants to be a global health undergrad isn't going to be able to do the kinds of things that I'm doing. But everybody who's a philosophy major isn't going to be a philosopher either. So I am curious to see how that's evolving, and how we can, just tell people about the opportunities, facilitate people that want to do that, find out if there's more, if we're missing, for example, underrepresented minorities that don't have these kinds of ideas or examples in their life, and make those opportunities available to them. But it's a great question, and we certainly across NIH the interest is still there, and the other institutes are very willing to support these kinds of opportunities. So thanks for that.
Okay.
Well, that was a great talk, Peter. I really enjoyed it and learned a lot. One of the things that in my career, during the period when HIV became evident, and when it was clear in the hemophiliacs, because as you mentioned, I'm a hematologist, it's clear that in the hemophiliacs that they were coming down with some strange diseases that we didn't recognize, and it turned out it was HIV. Yeah. One of the things so my slant then would be then the hematology slant, okay? And through the blood bank, we were pretty influential in terms of, and pressurized to try to implement HIV testing and, get that whole thing going to protect the public. And at NIH, they had quite a bit of discussions, including a few I got invited to, just to contribute whatever bit of experience that I might have in what they were talking about. And what evolved from that was a thing called the Transfusion Medicine Academic Award. So this was an award, it was conceived of as a 5-year award that would basically fund an individual, only one to a medical school, only one, that was the way it was gonna work. Their best bet to get the award and it turns out really, obviously every hospital has a blood bank, and some of these folks that do that are interested in research. And it was a marvelous program because it brought together a lot of people that kind of knew each other, like they'd heard of each other, or they vaguely knew of each other. They knew they were both interested in this area. So my question would be, what at each medical school, you're going to have some cadre or group. Often I find it very ad hoc. When I first came to Brown, there was a scarcity of everything. You name it, they didn't have enough of anybody in that area. And so I ended up doing a lot of the malaria, Even though it wasn't my field, I didn't treat malaria. I knew what it was. I could identify it by looking at a blood smear and helping students learn how to identify malaria. But I was struck as sort of the loose. There were other people in there too, Chuck Carpenter, for example. There were different people. And it's listening to your talk, I was thinking, well, wasn't that a little bit like the situation of global health now? Meaning that probably at each medical school there is some sort of a cadre,
Yes.
Meaning more than one person.
Yes.
That's not just sort of vaguely interested, but deeply interested enough. And if you could, just a suggestion, if something like the Transfusion Medicine Academic Award, which did work and was marvelously successful, it seems like if you could identify at each medical school that leader of that cadre, how small or large it is, the leader, and give them a special designation from Fogarty.
Yeah.
The Fogarty Award, like something that would be actually very prestigious, and it would speak to what was said earlier about promotion. Mm-hmm. I think something like that really attracts promotion committees. They say, "Oh, look at this, a national, group, and this person managed to become part of it, and it was competitive." So I just throw that out there, and I don't know whether you probably have considered something like this possibly, but I'd like to know your thoughts on it, if you would.
Sure. Yeah. No, we had something like that. We had these framework awards, and it was about a decade ago. And Brown was one of the recipients, and it was really, sort of early in this global health. So much enthusiasm about global health research. And so it was making awards to U.S. institutions and U.S. institutions partnering with low and middle income country institutions to really bring together. And we said you had to have 3 different schools at the university participate, but it was usually every school. So it was the law school, the medical school, the business school, engineering. Everybody wanted to be part of these global health centers. And so, for Fogarty, it's always this very little bit of money, but then everybody's so good-hearted and altruistic that they put a lot more resources into that. So we've done that sort of thing. I think the closest now would be like our K Award, our Career Development Award, where we give 5 years of mentored research support for individuals, and that's quite prestigious and quite a good launch to the people in those careers. But just thinking about AIDS was first sort of recognized in 81. The virus wasn't discovered until 83, and the test not until 85. And you think about COVID, we had the sequence in days. We had a candidate vaccine in a month, and a proven effect, test immediately, and a proven, well, not immediately in the US setting, but, we were able to test for it quickly, and then a proven effective vaccine in a year. So how far we've come. Different pathogen, obviously.
So we have time for one question, and then Susan, sorry, thank you, and Ron, we can, you can continue the discussion with Peter when we'll be in the reception in the lobby. So, but I would like to ask a question, Peter, that asked by a colleague and there's an online
in the chat.
Viewer on the chat, that as a physician who is passionate about health education and research,
now it's gone.
and research, and is very much interested to pursue their career, what kind of Fogarty training can help that person that interested in health education and medicine?
Yes. So sorry you're not here in person and we can't talk during the reception. Definitely go to our website on the next slide and look at all the different training opportunities and funding opportunities. Subscribe to the newsletter. Just to make a distinction, so the NIH is a scientific research agency. We're not a development agency. We're not USAID. So we're not training people to do medical care. We can sometimes sort of, we had some PEPFAR funding for something called MEPI and now HEPI in the African Forum for Health Education and Research. So we can say, well, we'll fund medical education, including a very strong research component as part of that. So just to keep that in mind, that if you want to, be a health educator or, a medical school professor, unless it's research focused, that's maybe out of bounds for what NIH does. But thank you, Malavika.
Thank you, Peter.
And looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, so I forgot to introduce myself. So I'm Malavika Sharkar. I'm a professor at Brown School of Public Health in the Behavioral and Social Science Department. So I invite all of you to join the reception, and then you can continue your conversation with Peter. But thank you very much, Peter, again. And thank you, Dean Jane, for organizing this event. Thank you.